My name is Simon Holmedal. I'm a motion designer and technical director at Mouvo's Machine. What really excites me about where the motion graphics industry is going is that obviously it's maturing, it's spreading, and you see it taking on all these different shapes. Some of it becomes more interactive, other things are more like, traditional, and like I'm really into like walking the line between VFX and motion graphics and taking it from that approach. But what really stands out to me is how much better the tools have become like the last few years. You can look at a project that an individual has made now and it would have been like a full production house that would have done this 5 years ago. So that to me says that we're probably going to be working in smaller teams and like individuals are going to have a lot of power in the future. People say that tools don't matter, computer doesn't do anything, it's the artist that sits there, and that's somewhat true, but I do think that the tools definitely inform the way you approach problems. I know that I work very differently using Houdini than when I'm using Cinema 4D. All you have is a hammer, every problem is going to look like a nail. So, it's that kind of thing. So tools definitely matter.
We're gonna be talking a lot about shoes. There's a lot of shoe porn. We're gonna start playing a couple of films we did last year. If they gave us free shoes, I might have wear them. I do have a lot of Nike shoes as well, but So that's kind of the bright side of things, the light, friendly, happy things. I'm coming from a much darker place myself, and I like to do really dark and evil-looking stuff. Flyknit is this thin thread technology. It's kind of like these shoes that kind of look like socks. Flyknit is kind of like a skin. It's one organism, but it takes on different patterns, and depending on the pattern, it has serves a different function. Much like the human skin. So it's all about this boot that is kind of predatory, and it takes on different shapes and camouflages itself into the environment. So that's kind of the general concept with all of this. And here's that kind of infection system again. And it doesn't look anything like Flyknit, to be fair. But that's kind of perfect for this spot, because this spot was all about things that didn't appear like the things that they were, and vice versa. Another aspect of the Versus job was kind of this choral system that I had to develop, and I also played around with like weird sea life structures and stuff, trying to figure out how geometric pattern can generate something organic and like repetitive in a more organic fashion, not just like simple polygons.
I would love to work on like title sequences and stuff like that for films. That would be great, because shoes is always fun as well, but I would love to like try to apply that sort of thinking and aesthetic to other clients.
I've done a lot of this kind of fractal superstructures, using subdivisions and whatnot, and kind of trying to morph the points, and then do that iteratively, kind of generates this kind of fractal patterns. And what really inspires me is that you can take a really small idea and kind of expand it and scale it up to something that is a lot more epic. So here's kind of more of a complete thing with a bunch of different shit happening at once. All these loops and different delays, and all being deformed by the surface that are being deformed by the infection system. It's all procedural. You can change the starting point from it whenever you want. It's mad. It's really fun though. Points on splines pushing away from each other, and then reinterpreting the splines. But it creates all this organic and natural patterns, which is just so nice.
I do a lot of coding, but I don't think it's important. It's one way of achieving your goals. I think if you're into it, then absolutely do it, but if you're not, and I think I see a lot of really amazing animators that don't know anything about making stuff procedural or scripted, and they do really well, you know, so it doesn't really matter. I don't think it's important at all. I personally think it's fun, so that's why I do it. I have an HTC at home. I really like it, but I try not to mix business and pleasure too much. I can see the appeal of it. I've tried Medium as well, which is kind of like a sculpting program, like ZBrush or 3D Code, but for VR, and I think that has huge potentials to be something that I could see myself using in production. I'm not personally interested in creating content for the VR thing, but what it does for you when you use, if you ever tried it, is that it really sets the scale of things. And that's one of the really hard things when making 3D in general, like making sure that everything has the right proportions and scale. And sometimes you might have an image and you can't really tell what's wrong with it because something is off in the scale. By doing VR content, you're limiting yourself to, like, you can't push as much data because it's like you need to render it 60 or 90 frames per second times 2 screens and stuff like that. I like to have the control over the experience. I like the kind of borders. If you're into that kind of stuff, you should definitely just don't even question it. Of course you should do it, because it's like something that is definitely going to stick around, I think. It's impossible to predict where it's heading. I think but judging from where we are now, it's going in every direction. You're going to see less people that are just graphic designers that don't do any kind of moving or interactive content, because it's becoming more and more part of our society. Like just a few years ago, before the iPhone came out, everyone had this kind of crappy phones. No one had set the standard, but now like we have it everywhere. Everyone has like this future iPads and stuff. You know, this used to be science fiction a few years ago. What I would love to see is kind of like more interface stuff for like software, say in Cinema or Houdini or whatever. If you could have like a graph editor on like your iPad that you could that would be sick. I would love that. Like being able to like multi-touch and do stuff that are, you know, better. Sliders and stuff would be cooler to do on a touch interface than doing it with a clicking of the mouse and dragging. And you can do it live and real time and stuff like that. That would be cool to see more of. Another thing, I guess, is we're still looking at flat screens, right? We're visualizing a 3D object on a 2D screen. This needs to change, I think, because you can't really see perspective or where something is without looking at it from 4 different angles, and it's really tedious. So I think that's one of the things that is still quite limiting and that technology can probably help with.